Chapter 13. First Sighting. Cresting the hill and looking out over the horizon, Angelique and the others saw what they thought were just dark clouds, but they were much more. The clouds that they had been watching were in fact the death of St. Louis. The three stood silently, at a loss for words at the sight of the distant flames consuming large and small buildings alike. Each could hear the other gasp as they laid eyes on a single side of the landmark St. Louis arch, bent over and ready to give way to gravity as smoke obscured its image. "I don't believe it," Todd exclaimed, full of emotion. "I was just here last month visiting family, and now... What he was seeing stole the words from him. "I'm afraid this will not be the last time we see sights like this." Angelique's voice was full of sorrow at the thought. "As a country, we brought it on ourselves. This is what happens when people don't hold accountable those who are elected to lead. Now we all must pay for that mistake." Watching as large Chinese transport carriers flew overhead making their landing approach, Ken felt he had to ask, "Are we going in there?" Silence once again fell over the three. "I have to," Angelique said. "Todd, Ken, return to the others and let them know what is going on here and what to expect." She checked her weapons as he issued the instructions. Almost as one, Ken and Todd spoke. "To hell with that!" They began checking their own weapons. A shocked look covered Angelique's face. As the head of a Homeland Security office, she wasn't used to others outright disobeying her orders. It took only a second for her to realize that she was no longer that person or in that position. "Then hide the bikes. We're going on foot from here." She wouldn't have admitted it to them, but she was relieved they were heading off into what appeared to be a war zone with her. While Angelique kept watch, Todd and Ken began covering the 3 motorcycles they had used for the journey. Quietly, they gathered brush, car parts, boxes, and anything else they could find to create a look that said, "Nothing to see here, so don't bother digging." While they worked, each glanced at the smoldering city and thought about the decision they had just made. Ken's curiosity began to get the best of him as he wondered why Todd had chosen to continue into St. Louis. He tried many times to carry on a conversation with Todd, only to find that he wasn't a big fan of talking. Most conversations were short and to the point, no matter how much he attempted to keep them going. But still he tried, and with his curiosity growing, he asked Todd as he came over with an old beaten road sign full of bullet holes. "Hey, so why are you going to follow her into that?" He pointed over to the city. Todd thought for a second before replying. "Should be interesting." Then he placed the sign onto the heap covering the bikes. Taken aback by Todd's answer, he blurted out, "Interesting? What part is interesting?" "We all have our own idea of it," Todd remarked as he moved a few pieces of brush around. Thinking that the conversation would end there due to past experience, Ken turned to find more items of trash when he heard Todd speak. "Why are you?" Ken stopped in his tracks, not used to Todd asking conversational questions. Tactical, operational, yes. Not conversational. "Well, Angelique and I go back many years. Even served in the army together. It just wouldn't feel right not to continue." When Ken finished, he stood waiting for Todd to respond. Quickly he realized that in Todd's mind the conversation had run its course. Letting out a forced breath and shaking his head in disbelief that Todd thought the conversation was over, Ken slowly turned to continue with the task at hand. "Down!" Angelique shouted at a high whisper so that her voice wouldn't travel beyond the 3 of them. With that one word, Ken and Todd lowered quickly to the ground and began making their way back over to her position. "What is it?" Ken asked as soon as he was close enough for her to hear his whispered question. "2 troop carriers heading this way." Angelique pointed in the direction she had spotted them as she relayed the information. "You think they saw us?" "No. They seem to be just patrolling the area." "Well, that looks like a good place to start. We can stay to their rear and follow them back through the city." Todd spoke with confidence as the other 2 looked at him as if he were crazy. Are you nuts? Those are the kinds of things we want to avoid. Ken stressed the portion of his response. Without taking his eyes off the Chinese patrol in the distance, Todd calmly explained, "We know where they are, and that is better than not. If they are on patrol, then they have a certain area. It will make it easier to get through that area knowing where they are." Angelique saw the logic in Todd's explanation and agreed. Ken was still reluctant, but thought, "What the hell? It's better than anything I have." After quickly gathering what they needed and stashing the rest, the three watched and listened for the Chinese patrol. Moving from one position to another, they found themselves making good time and covering a great deal of area. Each time they heard the large troop carriers, they hunkered down so as not to be seen, but still keep within sight of the others. Once they passed, each of them rose from their hiding places and visually made contact with one another before moving forward into the city. Keeping at least 10 to 20 meters between them ensured that, if one was spotted, then the other two would have an opportunity to react. More than a few times the patrol slowed, and once it stopped, causing some tense moments. Each time it moved on without incident, and the residential area they were in provided many places to hide. After the patrol had passed once again, Todd, who was leading the way, stood and looked for the others before moving to his next position. As he moved, he noticed what appeared to be leaflets scattered on the ground and quickly scooped one up as he passed. Not wanting to take his focus from his movement, he waited until he was secure behind a dumpster. After looking back and seeing that the others had made it to new positions, he turned his attention to the paper in his hand. What it said wasn't surprising to him after what they had just seen. "Citizens of the Republic of China, we ask that you remain in place during this transition. Due to recent events, China will be securing the land and prosperity used to secure your country's debt. Resistance will be dealt with swiftly." Todd had no interest in reading any more of the propaganda, but felt that Angelique and Ken should be informed. With enough room between the dumpster and the building behind him for all three of them, Todd signaled Angelique and Ken to rally to his position. Angelique was the first to reach the dumpster and was curious as to why he chose to have them gather in one spot. "What is it?" Todd handed her the leaflet, and as she read it, shaking her head in disbelief, Ken joined them and also began reading while Todd watched the area. "So, all of this is foreclosure?" Ken asked the others after reading the leaflet. Todd couldn't help from cracking a smile at the comment. "Looks to be. Guess they don't do extensions." Angelique wasn't as amused by the thought. "So now we are supposed to just submit and let them have our country? I'll be damned if that happens." For the next few minutes, they discussed how this could have happened, suggesting everything from the national debt to the selling of national parks and monuments to China. "Do you think people have realized now how bad of an idea that was?" Angelique watched another Chinese fighter jet pass overhead, followed by the sound of the Chinese patrol passing by on the street adjoining the alley they were now in. Todd felt that he was more of a realist and answered her, although he knew it was a rhetorical question. "No. I'm betting they still don't believe that really happened." "Okay, well then." Angelique stopped when she heard the patrol approaching. Each of them listened. It sounded as if it were slowing down. "Shit. You think they spotted us?" Ken whispered. "No. They passed our position already. Looks like they stopped a few houses down," Todd replied as he kept watch. "We need to move." Angelique didn't like the fact that they were all three hiding behind a dumpster that would stop very few bullets from passing through to them. By the time she had finished speaking, weapons fire erupted from just down the alley, drawing their attention. Todd watched as people in the alley dropped as the bullets rang out. "It's a group of civilians. We need to flank the patrol before they're all dead." Angelique and Ken watched as a smaller group close to their position huddled behind what used to be a brick wall. Most of them looked like kids. Angelique bolted from her position and ran across the alley, not waiting for Todd and Ken. The sight was too much for her to sit and plan out the next move. Her instinct to save others had taken over, knowing there was no time to spare. Surprised by Angelique's sudden movement, Todd and Ken looked at each other and followed suit, not knowing what she had planned, but hoping she had one. Making his way across the alley, Todd kept an eye on the activity taking place just down from them and saw that someone in the pile behind the bricks moved in the same direction as they were. As they moved quickly, trying to keep up with Angelique as she ran from house to tree, to shed and back to another house, Todd noticed that the rate of fire suddenly reduced sharply. Thinking that the fight might be close to an end, he picked up his pace and ran for the front of the last house, hoping to cut off others who may still be coming around. Before Angelique moved out of sight, he watched as she swung her M4 to her back and drew the pistols from her hips. Ken followed right behind her, and Todd continued to the front. Angelique quickly spotted at least 8 soldiers and 5 dead on the ground. She took aim at 3 who were targeting a man on the ground behind a small tree and began firing. Not concerned with quick kill shots, Angelique aimed for the chest of the first 2. As they fell, she turned to the 3rd man and another on the other side of the yard, pulling the trigger twice on each pistol while keeping count of the rounds that were left. 8, 7, 6. Now hearing Ken firing from behind her, Angelique returned her attention to the first 2 she had dropped as they drew their weapons to once again take aim, this time not at the man behind the small tree, but at her. Protected by the vests they wore, the first rounds had only knocked the wind out of them. It was something she had noticed as she fired at them the first time, and was now taking aim to correct. With almost inhuman quickness, she placed a .45 caliber round in each of the 2 soldiers' heads before they could fully take aim on her, all the while continuing to count down the rounds. 5, 4. Lying on the ground, Blankenship was thankful to see the first 2 Chinese soldiers who were preparing to kill him fall. It wasn't until after they were put down for good the second time that he realized he wasn't breathing.